Welcome to WROL Broadcast. I am Hate Mail. With me today, I have Bolsey, aka the Ocean, leader of the
Hey
Court of Owls.
guys. Hello.
And we're going to talk about probably not a fun topic, but it depends on how you spin it. But before we get into that, Bolsey, how's everything going with you? You mentioned before we start the call you just visited mom for the first time in
Yeah,
6 months.
just visited my mother for the first time in 6 months. In fact, the first person who I know that I've seen since the 24th of March.
Wow.
Except for 5 minutes when I drove to my friend's house and surprised him and parked outside and literally stood at the door for 5 minutes talking. So, yeah, a bit mad really. Didn't do anything, just literally sat there watching TV. But I suppose you need to spend some time with your family, don't you?
I saw my parents for a couple weeks ago. We met them for lunch somewhere. And then I guess Florida's spiking big time right now, so I probably should be.
Yes, yeah.
You
What's
wouldn't know
happening
it.
with that then? I do kind of like on Google search do for coronavirus second wave in every like a few hours just to see if there's any new information about that. But I have seen articles in Florida, but there's no change to any social distancing or anything like that, is there not?
You wouldn't. It's so funny because, and I've been expecting this huge second wave because there is zero difference when you're out and about. Like you see like one or two people with a mask, and that's it. Like you
Really?
couldn't tell that there is coronavirus going on right now.
All right.
So it's a little alarming actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been going out to dinner, but we always sit outside because we always bring our dog. So
Yeah.
like it's really no different to us. Because
You see, we can't do that because there's nowhere to go because everything's still closed.
well, in Florida, everything has outdoor seating anyway because
Well,
it's on the
exactly, yeah.
water.
In
And
outdoors, you'd be okay. Well, you'd hope you'd be okay outdoors.
yours, I mean, I figure you're about as good as you can be if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm ready for it to be
Yes.
over, but
Yeah. Well, we'll see, won't we?
yeah,
I don't want to go back to the office. I want to stay working from home.
I don't
That's
like
one
working
thing I
from
do
home,
want to
so
do.
I'm
Oh, I
I'm ready
love
to go back.
it.
I'm ready.
I'm able to get work done. That's the thing.
We're
Thing is, though,
supposed to go
I
back
work
next
too
month.
much. You what? Sorry.
We're supposed to go back next month.
Oh yeah. Oh, I don't know when we're going to go back. I don't think it's going to be. I think I've heard like Christmas. That's what I've heard, but yeah, we'll see.
I have a
Yeah,
feeling it's going to be August, September, or later, but
yeah,
we're seems full steam ahead for next month. We'll see.
yeah. Well, but that's not the only news, is it? That's not why we're here to talk about the coronavirus, is it? So,
No, we're not. So, let's talk about something even more depressing. um,
or is it?
or is it? We'll see. So, as some of you may or may not have heard, AT&T, who owns Warner Brothers, who owns Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, is selling Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, or they're intending to sell. And this is from CNBC, who they don't publish stuff unless they know for sure. They have very good interactive people that, and I reached out to Stanner, who used to work for them, and she's heard a little bit. I'm sure the employees there, just like any other merger. I've been part of major mergers with multi-gazillion dollar companies, and you don't know until, I mean, only the executive level people at the highest level know until it actually happens. But I'm sure they've seen this article, so they don't know what's going on. Um, so a lot of people, I've seen some posts going around. A lot of people are worried that this could mean the end of DC Legends,
But that
which,
does seem to be everyone's first reaction, isn't
yeah,
it?
which I mean,
Which I suppose is not
it could. I mean,
surprising.
in
Mm,
theory, it could if they decide that it's not doing well or it's not doing well enough, or they'd have to invest too much resources to make it worthwhile. But the one thing I will point to is that Stanner mentioned it in the podcast, and this game it surprises them how well it does my guess is that they don't put a ton, I mean, kind of obvious they don't put a ton of resources into the game. So it's a small team, small group. Some people are
because
saying that this wasn't going to be part of the sale, Warner Brothers San Francisco, but I confirmed that Warner Brothers San Francisco is part of um, this package that they would purchase.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at some articles now, and it looks like that the division, or Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, which is what it's actually called, consists of 10 studios, and they'd all be up for
Yeah, and
all be
Warner
up for
Brothers San
sale. But
Francisco is part of one of is one
yeah,
of the group. They're one of the smallest ones because they only have.
yeah,
But one of the IPs for Warner Brothers San Francisco is the Harry Potter, so which seems
but they don't actually own that though, do they? And they don't actually own DC Comics either, according to this article.
no, and they don't. Warner Brothers owns those, and one of the questions that people have is because Injustice, which is a very big IP, um, what does this mean? And I was watching some videos and reading some different things on that, and if a company, so if one of the main suitors purchases this, they will gain the rights to that game. Now, what that means is a DC Legends 2 or an Injustice 3, they would have to make a new negotiation because the intellectual property of those characters and everything is still part of Warner Brothers, which is
Hmm.
AT&T. But if they were to purchase these games, they can do whatever they want with those games that they're purchasing because they'll get licensing agreements. The only question that I have, and I would assume would be part of the package, is that games like Injustice and DC Legends constantly come out with new characters. So they'll have to get approval to use new existing characters. But when you're dropping the estimated price for purchasing this is 4 billion, you're going to
Yeah,
work those things out because at first my first thought was, oh gosh, they probably shut this down, but I was talking to a few people, talking to Joker, looking at some previous interactions that happen like this and what a new company does not want to do. So let's just say that Activision Blizzard, who's the one I'd be rooting for most to
yeah.
purchases this. They're not going to just take these games and then just end them. I mean, why would you do that? Why would you pay
Can you
so much
imagine?
money?
Can you imagine if that happened?
Yeah, I mean, why would you
What
pay
would we
all that money
do?
just to end it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, granted, DC Legends of all the grouping, the games in this group is probably the smallest, and I mean, just to be blunt, it's probably the most likely one that they would axe if they were to axe any of them. But even then, think about this. They're saying they're in talks. So usually when word gets out, that means they're probably close to a deal. But there's still
Yeah.
regulatory, whenever there's companies this size, purchases this size, there's all kinds of things that have to be worked out. So it's probably going to be 6 months to a year before this transaction even finalizes. And then having been part of previous mergers and, just followed a lot of this kind of stuff in my current employment, it's usually another year before companies that make these acquisitions make wholesale changes to franchises that they purchase because they want to see how the staff works, how everything works out. Then they'll probably do some reorganizing, rearranging, and we'll probably see some type of changes. We'll either know if the game has a long term future or we'll know if they're looking to wind it down or potentially end it.
So I've got a few questions actually. So I didn't. Started listening to the podcast with Stanley, but then he started talking about American football, and I was like, I have no interest in this whatsoever. So I turned it off. And Matt, I don't know if you kept on talking about that because it's quite a long podcast. Did you actually talk about that just out of interest? Was it all about American football or
No, no, no. We
whatever?
that
Oh,
was
right, okay.
we actually didn't
I
talk
might.
about that very long.
All right, I might have to come back to that
Yeah,
then.
we just tend to talk about
Anyway,
DC
so
Legends
yeah,
as a whole, but
obviously, what insight did Stanley give in terms of the health of the game, as it were? She gave some insight that it is quite successful.
yeah, she did mention that DC Legends was one of those games that constantly surprised them with how well it would do.
Yeah,
So,
that's because of us, isn't it? Really, that's because of
yeah, I mean,
the thousands we spent.
exactly. So,
But I have noticed though, just on that point, we do. I mean, obviously, I know there's that tracking website thing. I can't think what it's called now. But I've seen something recently that I don't know if you shared that or if someone shared that on Reddit. You know, where it shows you how much revenue has been made and
oh
how many
yeah, yeah.
downloads, and that's increasing.
Hmm.
Um, we see in Reddit lots of new players. I think it seems to me every time I look, there's like newer players um, who are joining Reddit and you know playing the game. What about the ads though? These ads that have been added. Do you think that's? Well, how do we know if that's got anything to do with it? But it's quite timely, isn't it? If they've added these ads to the game,
It
what do you
actually makes a
think?
lot of sense to me because think about it. You're a company shopping. you have three big suitors, and they list the suitors as Take-Two, Electronic Arts, EA, and then Activision Blizzard. Electronic Arts owns a lot of very, I would say, people would call it predatory microtransaction style games. So I really hope it's not EA because I could see.
So what would be your view if they took it? What's your fear? Because this is where I don't really know. I just play the game. I don't really look into all the different developers and publishers and whatever. What do you mean when you say that they're quite aggressive in their microtransactions?
Well, if you look at the Star Wars version of this game, which, in a lot of ways, I'm jealous of all the content, but
Yeah,
it was recent, there was a big hubbub over there with one of their YouTubers who has like 150,000 followers, and he got banned. One of his accounts got banned because he bought what they call a Kraken level account, which Kraken level account means you spend $100,000 a year on the account.
really. This is what Juicy was talking about in chat, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so they expect their players on average to spend $7,000 a year to stay competitive, which is just mind-boggling. I mean
It's
that puts the
ridiculous.
biggest whales in DC Legends. It makes us look like chump change. So I mean, it's
Well,
yeah, I was gonna say that might be
I think
doable,
at my height,
but that's to be competitive, not to
yeah,
be the top 1%.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
insanity. And I know Marvel Strike Force is kind of the same way. So on one hand, we may get more content than we've ever seen before. We may get it could be great stuff, but you know, the cost of everything will significantly rise. So it's how
Mm.
bad do you want new content, new everything?
I haven't really played. Well, I think I played Marvel Strike for about 5 minutes. It didn't really land with it. I knew it was quite expensive, so I thought I'm playing DCL, so I don't want to, overburden,
But let me ask you a question.
overburden
So
myself as I do.
say DC Legends, one of these companies bought
Yeah.
and you know they release Chapter 9, Chapter 10, Level 100, Gear 12, but there's like the raids we want, not the raids we have. All the content you've ever always wanted, but to be the tippy top, it's going to cost you thousands more than it already does.
Mm. That wouldn't work, would it? Basically,
It would be tough because
it
you
wouldn't
want the
work.
content, you want everything, but suddenly if you want to stay, top of the food chain, it's outrageous. I think I'd still accept it and just have to, you know, restrain myself because if it makes the
Yeah, we
game
all know
way
how
better.
difficult that is, though, to restrain yourself, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
like, seriously, last week I bought myself an extra pack. I wasn't even drunk. It was like a Saturday morning. And I thought, oh, she's really good. I'm going to get another one. And then I've just spent on Donna Troy and DOJ as well. So,
Well,
and
my
I have been
dream,
quite good with my spending recently, then.
my dream is if Activision Blizzard purchases it. I know a lot of people don't like Activision for some reason, but if you play the Modern Warfare, Call of Duty games, all their microtransactions, for the most part, I mean, there's a few like guns you can purchase that kind of give you a slight competitive edge, but it's minimal. It's all cosmetic. Overwatch, all cosmetic. Hearthstone is the closest thing to a microtransaction, mobile game, which I played that for years. You could spend roughly $200 every new season, which is every 3 or 4 months, and
Mm.
that would get you everything in the entire game. So when you compare that to DC Legends, it's jump change. And
Oh,
you do
yeah,
really
exactly,
you could
isn't
spend
it?
nothing and
Yeah.
get quite far. And most of their stuff is more cosmetic based. Like it's things you don't have to have it to be competitive. It's just things if you want it type of thing.
So if you if it did go bad for DCL, obviously, if you say we've got a time frame of 24 months as you set
That's
out
my
earlier
guess. I
on,
would I would say 1.5 to 2
obviously,
years
on your
probably
guess,
before we
yeah,
see big
but
changes.
what would you expect to see if things were started to go bad for the game? What would
I
be
think we
your...
would see. I think we may see new content, which would get everybody excited at first, and then you would see changes to the economy. So suddenly it would be, it would actually some of the things we want, where like a Wraith Arena and things would change to where the heavy spenders have a massive advantage. Like
Mm,
like you would probably see Gear 12 roll out, but the difference between Gear 11 and Gear 12 will be astronomical. And
yeah.
then the level differences. If you're level, and then you would see wholesale, like a lot of the things we claim we want, but then we aren't. When it actually happens, we may be unhappy that we got it, type of thing. Be careful what you ask for
Yeah.
scenario because it would become very pay to win. Um, and while you want your more powerful characters to be more powerful, you don't want it to be where you feel like you absolutely have to. You are not going to survive in the game. So I think we would see things like that. It would just everything would be more expensive, way more expensive. So I could see that going bad. Or the worst case scenario in my mind would be they just pull the plug.
I mean, that would be bad, wouldn't it, really? I mean, we've got our own little communities, haven't we, in different alliances, and obviously there's the war that's brewing between us and another alliance, and we'll see what happens about that in a few weeks' time. But, you kind of like, you get close, like, fair enough, we're in totally thousands of miles apart, in our alliance, there's those people in the US, people in Europe, it was one person in the Middle East, in Asia, but we all, I think we virtually spend quite a lot of time with each other, don't we, really,
Yeah,
on the various chats that we
I know
have.
I
And
talk to you guys
that'd
more
be
than I
quite...
talk to my wife, so
Well, I'm lucky I'm by myself, so I'm not... I don't have that pressure. Um, yeah, I don't think, like... I mean, well, I don't suppose you know, do you, really? I mean, they
I,
don't do any advertising for it, I mean, there was those few adverts on that website, the CBR website, a few months back. Um,
there's no
but
way to know for
this...
sure, but I would think
No,
my my thought processes on it is that unless they just decide that it's old code and it's more hassle than it's worth, it's also a game that, I've heard this internally, externally, that the game is resource light. Like it doesn't take a ton of resources to keep the train chugging along. So it would kind of be foolish to get rid of it. And also, I would think if I'm a corporate suit coming in and I'm just looking at numbers, okay? So I see a game, I look at how much it costs to make, I look at the return on investment, and say, hey, this game does okay. With no advertising, no, major updates in for long periods of time other than your typical monthly update. And then they look at the projected or the estimated revenues for Marvel Strike Force. Or, the one positive to Electronic Arts buying it is they have this game, the basically a Star Wars version of this game. And they see
yeah.
how well Marvel does, and they're like, hey, DC is the closest thing to a direct competitor to Marvel. So why aren't we making anywhere near as much as they are? Let's make it, make a ton of money.
I mean, it is the only game that's available on iOS and Android for DC characters,
Other than
where you're
Injustice.
able to...
Injustice is the only other
Well,
one.
yeah, Injustice, but obviously that's a wider game, isn't it? Because you got it on the PS, you got it on all the consoles as well, don't you? Whereas this is like, because I don't console game anymore. I've got a Nintendo Wii U, which was a rather stupid purchase, but I purchased it nevertheless, which is sat there, and a PS3. And I suppose because I've put so much money into this game, it kind of stops me from doing anything else, really.
I mean, when you
But,
compare the two, I just pulled up the estimated revenues for Marvel Strike Force. Marvel Strike Force averages 6 million a month versus DC Legends
wow,
300,000. So
that's mad, isn't it?
yeah, and I'm sure it cost, they spend a lot more, but it's a huge, huge revenue maker. So you would
Mm,
think that a company would say, hey, we have the infrastructure. Let's do it. What's even crazier to me is I just pulled up Star Wars, which is an old game. Like that game's been around since before DC Legends,
yeah.
and it's
And they
making
changed that sorry, they changed that as well, didn't they? Wasn't that really stagnant? And then they basically changed everything, and it's now really popular.
Yeah, it was actually that game did for a good while. It was um they did nothing. Like there was no updates for like a year, and then they like went back and invested a ton of resources. And this is just Google. I'm not even looking at iOS by the way for the 6 million
Yeah.
for Marvel Strike Force. Star Wars did 7 million last month.
Wow,
So if, if Star Wars is still
that's
doing a
mad.
million more than even Marvel Strike Force, that's impressive.
It is, isn't it? I mean, this game's got so much potential as well, hasn't it? That's the thing. I mean, I do find it quite stale sometimes, especially after Age. I've got no desire at all to play it.
And I think, but that's
But
that's where I think that I mean, granted, I'm being an optimist here, and anything could happen. But I just think that they have to look at these two brands and say DC's brand isn't too far. I mean, it's not as popular as Marvel or Star Wars, but it's not too far off.
It's not too far off, no.
And you would think that they would say, hey, if we just invest resources into this. One question that Kage asked me, which was a very good question, was why wouldn't Warner Brothers San Francisco or Warner Brothers invest into it? And I would say for two reasons. One, Warner Brothers Interactive is not Warner Brothers itself and AT&T, they're not gaming companies. So this isn't like they've done well with games that they have, but they're not full-on gaming companies. And secondly, if we're hearing about this reported sale now, I guarantee this has been on the horizon for the last 2 years.
Mm.
So DC Legends about 2 years ago stopped getting major updates. I mean, we've had stuff, but we haven't had anything major. So they're not going to pour resources into a game that there's no guarantee on a return on investment when you're thinking about selling. I mean, you pucker up, you do things like ads to juice the bottom line with minimal effort, minimal cost. So I would think that would be the main reason for it. I mean, granted, there could be other reasons. Warner Brothers San Francisco is a small studio. They if they wanted to do huge additions to the game, they would have to build out the infrastructure. I mean, the platform. You think about how buggy and laggy it was at times during raids. That leads me to believe they're not on they would have to upgrade their servers. I mean, it would be a big expense, and they're not going to do that if they're thinking about selling.
Well, we'll just have to see, won't we? I think I'll be, other than coronavirus second wave, I shall now be Googling this now as well. Just
yeah, I'll be paying attention.
Just to keep. Obviously, as you say, these things don't just happen just like that. So obviously, it's due diligence, etc., etc. That has to happen.
And it looks like Mr. Josh is ready. So let's wrap it up here.
Yes. Cool.
And on our next episode, we have the world famous streamer Joshua Rs.
Well, hopefully he will be world famous if we've got anything to do with it.
Okay. All right, we'll end it there. Thanks for listening.
Okay. Hey, I'm Joshua Rs. Thank you for listening to the WROL Broadcast. If you like the show, consider becoming a Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/WROL Broadcast and get early reviews on new characters. And for even more Legends action, check out my daily stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/JoshuaRs, where I'm even teaching the owls some new tricks.